The widow they had left to starve was at her well at noon on the hottest Tuesday of the year, when the first man came up the road to beg for water. Ruth Calder heard the wagon before she saw it, the iron tire grinding on dust that had not been mud since May, and she did not stop pumping. She had learned in 2 summers alone on this piece of ground that you finish a chore before you turn around to whoever wants something of you. The water came up cool and steady from her spring-fed well, the only one in the valley that had not gone to mud in 3 weeks, and she filled the bucket and set it on the stone rim before she looked up. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. The man on the wagon seat was Hollis Bream, who farmed the section below hers and who had been at her husband's funeral 2 summers back and had not said a word to her since. Mrs. Calder, Mr. Bream. He sat his wagon with his hat in his lap, and his face the gray-pink of a man who had been driving in hard sun without enough to drink. 2 empty water barrels in the wagon bed, and a boy of about 9 on the seat beside him, the boy's mouth open a little, the boy looking at the bucket. "My well's dry," Hollis Bream said. "The Hetch place is dry. The Marleys are hauling from the South Fork, and the South Fork is mud by Thursday. I would not have come up here, Mrs. Calder, if I had any other place to ride. You have money for it." "I do not." She nodded once. She had not expected he did. "Pull the wagon under the cottonwood. The shade is better there. I will fill 1 barrel today. You can come back Saturday for the other. If you come more often than that, I cannot promise the well will hold." He looked at her. His mouth worked once. He had come up the road ready to be refused, and the not being refused had hit him harder than the refusal would have. "I am obliged. You owe me nothing. Pull the wagon." She filled his barrel that afternoon, a bucket at a time, 28 trips, and she did not let him pump because she did not let any man at her well. The boy watched her go back and forth. After the 7th trip, he climbed down without his father telling him to and said, "Ma'am, can I dip my hands?" She said, "You can dip them, and you can drink 1 cupful, and you can put your face in the bucket once before I pour it in." The boy did all 3. When he put his face in the bucket, she watched the small back of his neck, sunburned brown and peeling, and she felt the thing in her chest do the small turn it had not done in 2 years. She did not let her face do anything. She kept pumping. Hollis Bream drove out at 4 with his 1 full barrel, and the boy asleep against him, and the wagon raised dust all the way down the lane. Ruth went back to her kitchen and stood at the window with her hands on the sill and thought, "That is one. There will be more." There were. Word of a well that still ran travels in a valley faster than rain, in a year when the rain has not come. By Friday, she had been visited by the Marleys, the Hetches, a man named Tobias Cobb, who had bought the old Inman place the previous fall, and an older woman named Eulalie Pruitt, who drove up alone with 2 empty kegs, and her chin lifted in the way of a woman already insulted by the prospect of being told no. She filled them all, 1 barrel apiece, and she set a schedule. Marleys on Mondays, Hetches on Wednesdays, Breams on Saturdays, Cobb on Thursdays, Pruitt on Fridays. The well had 4 days a week to rest. She kept the schedule in her own head and did not write it down, because writing it down would have made it a thing the valley could argue with. The man who came on Tuesday of the 2nd week was Asa Webb. He was on a sorrel mare, mid-30s, the kind of lean that comes from working outside in a hot year, a faded blue shirt with the sleeves rolled past the elbows, a brown hat pushed back, dust of red road clay on his boots. He had moved into the old Vance section 6 months back, and he had not been around long enough for anyone to know much about him, only that he ran a small herd and kept to himself. He came up the lane slow. He did not pull the mare into her yard. He stopped at the gate and took the hat off. Mrs. Calder, she looked at him from the porch step. She had been shelling beans into a bowl. She did not stand up. "I do not know you. Asa Webb. I have the Vance section now. I know which section it is. What do you need?" He had a steady gray eye, and he held a look without making anything of it. "I do not need water today. My tank is half. I came up to ask whether you would let me set a meeting at your place Sunday afternoon. I have been to 7 houses this morning. There are men in this valley making talk about the well. I would like to settle the talk before it goes anywhere it should not." "What talk?" "The talk that a well in one woman's name is the valley's well and not the woman's well." Ruth set the bowl of beans on the porch step beside her. "Who?" He named 4. Tobias Cobb, the loudest of them, a man named Daniel Rowe, Sutter, the freight master, and the old judge who had retired up the valley 2 years back. "Cobb has been to me twice this week," Asa Webb said, "once for water and once with a notion. The notion is that the valley should put the well on a common subscription. He thinks it sounds reasonable. It sounds reasonable to a man who would like to own a thing he did not dig." "Yes." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because if Cobb brings 4 men to your gate on a Sunday with a paper in his hand," he said, "you should know it is coming before he comes. And because a meeting at your place would settle the thing on your ground and not on his." "Why my ground?" "Because you are the one who has the standing to set the terms." She looked at him a long moment. She had not been spoken to this plainly in 2 years. "You would come." "I would. You are asking me to invite men to my own gate who have been saying my name in a way I do not like." I will be there with you if you do." "Sunday afternoon," she said, 3 o'clock, at the Cottonwood. I will set out water for them, and they may speak in turn. If they have a paper, I will read it. If they have a claim, I will hear it. I will not promise more than that." "That is enough." He put the hat back on. He turned the mare. He was halfway down the lane when she stood up from the porch step. She watched him go. That night she sat at the kitchen table with the lamp turned low and a tin cup of cool water in front of her. And she thought about the 4 men and about Asa Webb on the mare at her gate. The well had been her husband, Joseph's well. He had hand-dug it the first year they had been on the place. 23 feet down through hardpan, cased it with cedar, laid the stone rim himself. He had been 41 and had a bad winter cough. No one had thought serious until the spring he had not woken up. The well had been Joseph's, and now, in his absence, it had become hers. And what some of the valley wanted with the well was the part of it that, being hers, had become a problem. She did not cry. She had cried herself out 2 summers ago. She drank the water in the cup and went to bed. Sunday came hot. The sky was the hard, pale blue it had been for 6 weeks. The cottonwood at the corner of her yard had begun to gold at the tips already, 2 weeks early, and the dust on the lane lay so thick that the wagons coming up made a brown plume you could see for a quarter mile. The Marleys came first. The Hetches followed. Hollis Bream brought his boy. Eulalie Pruitt came in her buggy and got out without help. Daniel Rowe rode up on a tall bay with a paper in his coat pocket Ruth could see the corner of. Sutter, the freight master, came in a wagon with his ledger on the seat. The old judge, whose name was Edgar Penton, came last and climbed down with 2 canes and would not let his hired man take his elbow. Tobias Cobb came on a good chestnut horse, riding alone. He took off his hat in the yard. He had the smile of a man who had decided the meeting before it began. Asa Webb came last. He did not tie his mare at the gate. He led her around the side of the house to the corral and walked back through the yard to the cottonwood. And he stood at the edge of the group with his hat in his hand and his back near to Ruth, but not so near that anyone could mistake him for speaking for her. Ruth stood under the cottonwood with a tin pitcher in her hand and a small folded paper in her apron pocket that was the original deed to the well. She let them have water first, each of them. A cup. She poured it herself. The judge took 2. Eulalie Pruitt drank without taking her eyes off Ruth. When the last cup had been poured, she set the pitcher on the bench. She did not raise her voice. "Mr. Cobb, you have come up here with a notion. Speak it." Tobias Cobb had the smile out. He had a paper in his hand. He had been rehearsing on the ride. "Mrs. Calder, friends, the valley is in a hard year. There is one well still running. It is a kindness of Providence that it does. But a kindness of Providence in a year like this is not a kindness for one alone to manage. I have drawn up a subscription." He held it up. "By it, the well at the Calder section becomes a valley resource for the duration of the drought. Each household pays a share. Each household draws a share. The well is administered by a committee. Mrs. Calder would of course be on the committee. One voice equal to the others." He held the paper. There was a quiet. "That is your notion." "It is. You have signatures already." "4, he said. He did not give the names. He did not need to. "Mr. Cobb, the well at this section was hand-dug by my husband in the year of our marriage. He cased it with cedar he cut from this land. He laid the stone rim. He filed the deed at the county 4 months before he died. The deed is in my apron pocket." She took it out, unfolded it once, folded it once, and put it back. "I have not had to show it in 2 summers. The well is mine. The water in it is mine. What I do with the water in it is mine. I have given water to every household in this valley that has asked, and I have set a schedule that does not break the well. The schedule will hold as long as the well holds. The well will hold as long as I am the one running it. That is the offer the valley already has. There will not be a second offer." Tobias Cobb's smile shifted. It did not go. "Mrs. Calder, the deed is a piece of paper." "It is. A piece of paper is a thing the world has been known to reconsider." She looked at the judge. Judge Penton. The old man leaned on both canes. "Yes, you sat the bench in this county for 30 years. I did. You filed my husband's deed. I did. He brought you with him. You had a green ribbon in your hair. He stood at my desk and he said the well was the one thing he had built with his own 2 hands that he wanted his name on. He paid the filing fee in coin and walked out. He was a particular man. He was." The judge looked at Tobias Cobb. "The deed is good, Mr. Cobb. The well is hers. The water in it is hers. Whatever notion you have drawn up on that paper does not have anything to do with the law of this county. If you bring it to me on a bench day, I will throw it out before noon dinner." He looked at Ruth. "Ma'am." Tobias Cobb's smile finally went. He turned to Asa Webb. "Webb, you are a reasonable man. You have a section. You have a stake in this valley. Tell Mrs. Calder what is good for the valley." Asa Webb did not move. He did not look at Tobias Cobb. He looked at Ruth. "Mrs. Calder has told the valley what is good for the valley. The schedule is fair. The well is hers. I will draw from it on Thursdays for as long as she will let me. I will pay her a fair price when she asks one. I will not be a part of any paper that is not hers." Hollis Bream broke the quiet. He cleared his throat. He took off his hat. "Mrs. Calder filled my barrel on the hottest Tuesday of the year, when I had come up the road with empty barrels and no coin. She let my boy put his face in the bucket. I am not putting my name on a piece of paper that takes that out of her hand and puts it in his." He looked at Cobb. "I have a name to leave my boy, and I am not leaving him this." Daniel Rowe took his name off the paper, standing right there in the yard. He walked up to Cobb and held out his hand, and Cobb gave him the paper, and Rowe drew a heavy black line through his name and gave it back and walked to his horse. Sutter did not move, but he did not speak either, and the not speaking was the loudest thing he had done that afternoon. Eulalie Pruitt looked at her cup of well water and said, in the voice of a woman who had decided some hours earlier, "Mr. Cobb, I will be coming on Fridays. I will not be on your paper." Tobias Cobb put the paper in his coat. He put his hat on. "The valley will not forget that this was offered." "It will," Ruth said, "by the next rain." He did not answer. He went to his horse. When the dust of the wagons had gone down the lane, and there was only Asa Webb left at the cottonwood with his hat in his hand, Ruth stood very still in the yard and felt the thing in her chest do the small turn it had not done in 2 years. She bent and picked up the empty pitcher and walked it to the well, and refilled it and walked it back. There were 2 cups left clean on the bench. She poured them both. She handed one to him. "You said your tank is half." "It is. You will not need water for 3 weeks." "I will not." She drank. He drank. The sun had gone past 4, and the dust in the lane was settling. "I am obliged to you. You are not." She looked at him. "What would you have me do?" he said. It was the same question her late husband had asked her at the end of the first year on the place, playing at the kitchen table with the lamp between them. She had not heard a man ask her that question in his exact tone since. She felt her hand not be quite steady on the pitcher. She set the pitcher down. "I would have you come around on Thursdays when you come for water. I would have you stay for a meal when you do. I would not have you ride home in the heat of the afternoon. That is what I would have you do for now. I am not asking past now. That suits." He put the cup on the bench. He put his hat on. He went around to the corral and got the mare, and rode out at a walk. Ruth watched until the dust had settled. Then she carried the pitcher and the 2 cups back to the kitchen and set the cups in the basin. He came on Thursday. He came every Thursday after. His tin cup moved over the weeks from the far end of the kitchen table to the near end, not all at once. By the 2nd week, he had taken his hat off at the door without being told. By the 3rd, he had carried in the bucket for her and set it on the block, and she had not asked him to. By the 4th, he had brought a small tin of coffee beans the freight wagon had brought up from the south, and he had set it on the shelf beside her sugar without a word. The drought broke on the 17th of September with a thunderstorm that came down off the ridge in an afternoon and put 6 inches of running brown water in every creek bed and dropped the dust on the lane for the first time since May. Hollis Bream came on Saturday and brought a paper sack of pears from a tree on his place, and he set the sack on her porch step and said, "Mrs." called her, "Thank you," and got back in his wagon and went home, and the boy on the wagon seat waved at her until the wagon was past the gate. Tobias Cobb sold his section in October and went south. The valley did not stop talking about it for a month, and then stopped in the way valleys do. In the second week of October, Asa Webb came with a deed to a 5-acre strip on the line between his section and hers, and he laid it on the kitchen table beside his cup of coffee. "Ruth, I have been thinking on this. The 2 sections share a fence for a 1/4 mile. There is a creek that crosses both. I have been carrying this deed for 2 weeks, and I have not been able to say what I came to say. I will say it now plainly because you asked plain when I came up the lane in August. I would like to be on this place with you. I would like to put my name beside yours. I have a section of my own, and I am not asking you to leave yours. I am asking what you will let me do." Ruth set down the spoon she had been using on the bean pot. She thought about the cottonwood and the schedule, and the paper Tobias Cobb had brought up the lane, and the way Asa Webb had stood with his back near, but not so near that anyone had mistaken him for speaking for her. She thought about Joseph in the ground behind the barn, and she found that thinking about him did not hurt the way it had hurt before, because what was being asked of her now was something Joseph had no claim on. "I will let you do it," she said. She did not say more than that. He did not ask her to. He picked his hat up. He put the deed back in his coat. He came around the table and laid his hand on her shoulder once, briefly, the way a man lays a hand on a fence post to test if it will hold. And he took the hand back. He sat down again across from her, and they finished the coffee. They were married at the small chapel at the crossroads on a clear afternoon in November, with the cottonwoods all the way gold along the lane, and the valley settled cool after a long dry summer. Hollis Bream stood up with her, because there was no other family near, and his boy held the rings, and Eulalie Pruitt sat in the second pew and bowed her head once at the end. Asa moved his bed and his books and his rifle into the back room in the second week of November. He did not move his name onto the deed of the well. He had not asked her to. She had not asked him to. The well was hers and remained hers for the rest of the dry years that came in that country, and there were several of them, and the schedule held every time. On an evening in the 2nd August, after she married Asa Webb, with the cottonwoods at the lane going gold at the tips 2 weeks early, again Ruth was at the well, drawing the noon water, and Asa was on the porch step, shelling beans into the bowl she had been shelling into the day he had ridden up the lane. "It was a Tuesday," she said. He looked up. "When you came up the lane the first time, it was a Tuesday. I know it." She brought the bucket to the porch and set it on the step beside him. She sat down. She did not lean against him because that was not how they sat. She sat near. "I am glad it was a Tuesday." "So am I." The cottonwood overhead shifted the smallest amount in a breath of warm air, and the well behind them was doing what it had been doing for 16 years, and the dust on the lane was already starting to settle into the long blue shadow of the late afternoon. And Ruth called her, sat on her porch step, beside the man who had not put his name on her well, and watched the valley go quiet at the end of a hot day. This was the story of Ruth and Asa, the widow they had left to starve, and the man who rode up her lane in a dry year. Tell me in the comments if you enjoyed this one. We are always glad you came to listen.